Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. So greatly appreciate it. Truly, truly is. So today we're going back down the Reddit rabbit hole with a new story time. I have not read these stories. I have no idea what they're about, and I'm going to react to them for the first time with you guys right now. So let's just jump right in. The day I was almost unalived senselessly in Vietnam. I still haven't told my family this story, as it would give them even more anxiety about my safety on my travels. Haven't posted about it publicly online either, as I don't run a blog on my site or use social media actively. So I guess this Reddit post is the first time since it happened in early 2019. I was traveling in Southeast Asia and was in Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon. Since I typically spend at least a month at each destination, I stay almost exclusively at Airbnb apartments. This time, however, I decided to go to Ho Chi Minh from a neighboring country at the last minute, so I didn't have time to find a good apartment. Before I secured one I wanted, I stayed at a small hotel for some days. The hotel had 2 to 3 rooms on each floor. When you walk up the stairs, there's one on the far left and one on the far right. The first few days, I stayed on the fourth floor on the right. The manager, who was a really cool guy, asked if I wanted to move to the fifth floor, as that room is better. I did, and this time around, my room was on the left. This is where it inadvertently got tricky. After a long night out one day, I returned around 5 a.m. The manager was at the lobby and we said hello briefly, and I headed up the stairs. No elevator. I got to the fifth floor, but instead of going left to my new room, I went right because I was used to going right to my old room. I had some drinks earlier that night, but nothing to impair my senses. I wasn't intoxicated at all. I got to the door, took out my keys, and tried to stick it in. It wouldn't go in at all. I thought, that's weird. I looked at the key to make sure it wasn't broken or perhaps stuck on something. I tried it again, same result. It was a narrow key and not the kind you can see into the room through a keyhole. I rubbed my finger on the keyhole to see if there was something blocking it or stuck in it. I bent over and moved my head close to the keyhole to inspect it and try one last time before going down to check with the manager. I'm trying to insert the key again when there's a deafening boom and a stiff wood crack on the door, about 1 to 2 inches from my left ear. It was followed by a strong smell of lead. To clarify, I'm talking about the smell of gunpowder or similar substance here, as lead is odorless. Also, the gun was certainly handmade, or it would have penetrated a wood door. In that instance, everything fell into place, and I had one of those classic my life flashed before me moments. Shit. I just accidentally tried to open someone else's door, and their first and only reaction was to shoot at the door. It was so surreal that all I did was turn around and walk across to my actual room and open it. I took this picture as I was about to close the door. That vertical crack is where the bullet tried to exit. I climbed into my bed and went to sleep in a slightly bewildered, what the hell just happened state. I woke up around noon and went down to the lobby. I saw the manager there and he went, "Hey man, what happened this morning?" I told him I went to the wrong door, tried my key, and I think someone shot at the door, so I realized it wasn't my room. He told me all kinds of authorities were at the hotel that morning because the people in that room called them. They told the cops that someone came to their door and was trying to break it down and was kicking at the door and whatnot. Obviously, that was a lie and just them trying to justify their extremely irresponsible and potentially fatal overreaction. He told me he knew what had happened, so he told the cops not to come bother me in my room because he was there when I returned. He said he had figured that I went to the wrong door before going to my room, and all that talk about someone kicking and trying to break their door down was just ridiculous. There are cameras at the hotel, so it was very easy to verify that, even if he hadn't figured it out on his own. He said the people, who were foreigners, yelled a lot, cursed loudly at him, and made him refund all their payments. He said the bullet severely shattered the door on the inside. Somehow, it didn't make the clean exit it attempted to. That bullet exit path would have been right through my head and effectively the end of me. I'm guessing it was a very small handgun, one easily concealable in a country like Vietnam, where it's very illegal to own firearms. The wood on the door was also pretty solid. If it was a hollow wood door, this would have been a very different story, or no story at all, as I'd be resting 6 feet under right now with a hole in my skull. I don't know how or why the authorities didn't detain them for being in possession of a firearm. I'm guessing they found a way to pass off the bullet damage as something else, or hid it from them. And since the manager would rather avoid the trouble with the authorities for his hotel, he let them slide. Can't blame him there. Till this day, I can't figure how one would be as insecure in a foreign country as to react like that. A normal person would first yell, "Who's there?" to alert the person that there's someone in there. And if the situation gets out of hand with impending threat to their safety, they can react to defend themselves. Accidentally going to a wrong door is a common enough occurrence in hotels that someone should at least consider that possibility first. Fair. My attempts to open the wrong door with my key were as quiet as that can be done. I wasn't drunk or anything, and I'm generally a calm person, so it's not like I was being rowdy or trying to open the door. Their first and only reaction was to pull out a gun and fire it at the door, with potential intent to kill. I don't know if these people were on the run from somebody out to get them, and felt the need to be John Wick wherever they went. However, it was completely uncalled for and an irresponsible overreaction, especially in a foreign country. They told the authorities that the person was trying to break down the door to rob them. So, imagine if the bullet had killed me. And that's the story they were sticking with. The headlines you guys would have seen on TV and online would have read: American man killed in Vietnam trying to rob fine tourists in a hotel. And my family would have lived with the shame and uncertainty of not knowing if their son and brother truly went and became a robber in Asia. Either way, I'm happy to get to that, and I'm still here to tell the story today. Update. I was responding to someone in the comments here, looked up something, and stumbled on an old Reddit post of someone else. The Reddit post and the account behind it may or may not be linked to the story. The person in the comments here was doubting the plausibility of someone in Vietnam putting together a homemade gun, smuggling one in, or concealing it. So I did a quick search, which returned this Reddit post. What stuck out most, that post is from the same time I was there 2 years ago. The poster said they arrived in Saigon that day and are staying at a hotel on the same street as mine. What are the odds? That sent me down a mini rabbit hole into his Reddit posts. And I'm not saying this is the person in question, but their interests and identical location at the time fit perfectly. Look at his posts from the same period 2 years ago, asking how to smuggle weapons into Vietnam. Look at some of his posts about the homemade guns and weapons he's put together. If you scroll through that person's profile, you will also see the really disturbing posts they've made, which I won't link here. Many of those posts suggest a mentally unstable person into very shady stuff, who also likes to make homemade guns and weapons. This is the kind of person I imagine would fire a homemade gun at a hotel door without uttering a warning. So even if this isn't the person, and it likely isn't, just be aware that people like this are out there and won't hesitate to put their homemade guns and weapons to use, the same way the person on the other side of the door did. I have no real personal interest in finding the person behind that door or reporting them to authorities. I just want to tell my story exactly as it happened and nothing more. I'm a 23-year-old Venezuelan American living in Hong Kong. In November, I was almost unalived by a mob gang in China after defending a girl from ABUSC. I now have a 7-inch scar on my face. Photos inside. I did see the photos because I wanted to make sure that the photos were still available. They are, and I'll show them to you. So guys, I'm posting this because it's been 3 months since this happened, and I actually enjoy retelling the story. It's almost therapeutic in a sense. Ask me anything about how it happened, about my terrible experience in the hospital, or life since. I was in mainland China with some friends on a Saturday night, and I stupidly tried to stop two men from hitting a woman outside of a club. I had already punched her in the face and started kicking her after she fell, so I took care of him. As soon as the fighting moved on to the second guy, many men attacked me from every direction, including one uniformed club staff member, I believe. But I'm not sure if they were a gang or just bystanders banding together to defend a local versus Westerner. They got me to the ground very easily and began punching and kicking while I was down. At some point, one sick bastard in the mob decided it would be smart to try to slice my face open with a knife or glass, and sadly, he accomplished it without me noticing. Luckily, it was only my forehead. What ensued after that was a fine display of Chinese incompetence. I was left unattended with my friends while covered in blood everywhere and shirtless for almost 2 hours while the doctor wasn't even busy, sitting at his desk the whole time. They were all so confused. After enough yelling, they eventually did the procedure, barely cleaning my face and using our archaic tools and methods to stitch me up without anesthesia. I finally checked into a proper hospital in Hong Kong last night and underwent reconstructive surgery to heal a hematoma and mend the nerves and muscles together, in addition to the fixing surface stitches, as the wound was very deep. Hopefully, the healing process will be smooth, but I'm afraid I'll probably have a scar for the rest of my days. So, I've learned my lesson. It's not always smart to get involved, even if you feel morally obligated. Though Shenzhen and Hong Kong are next door to each other, they are worlds apart, and trying to meddle in an unfamiliar environment was downright stupid of me, irrespective of the reasons for doing so. I want to make it clear that this was not heroic. Sure, I think this was the right thing to do, but it was a really dumb move. I'm back to normal now and have been for a while, but believe me, it is not a nice feeling. The sheer terror you feel after the fact when you realize you could have died is not fun. I can remember a few breakdowns that ended in tears, just thinking of how easily it could have taken a turn for the worse. Half an inch to the left, half an inch to the right, anything else, just crazy. Please don't ever feel inclined to do this unless there's no other option and you have an exit strategy. Some up to the minute snapshots taken right now at 3 a.m. So pardon the hair and bags. Anyway, you guys have kept me up way too late. Gotta get a couple hours sleep. Thanks again, everyone. I was almost unalived in Mexico. I'm posting here because I've never told this story before, and I haven't traveled even out of the state since I got back almost 10 years ago. My wife wants to go somewhere for our 7-year anniversary, but I still don't think I'm ready or trust the world enough again yet. I, 20 male at the time, was traveling with a friend through Mexico. My friend is the same age as I, also male. I should note that I am not native, but I am a fluent Spanish speaker. Anyway, we were walking down the street to the local mini mart, and then we were crossing a small alley, which would have led us directly in front of the store. Before we made it to the other side, a guy about mid-20s, riding a motorized pizza delivery sit-down scooter, cuts in front of us and stops, saying to wait. He wanted to talk to us. Politely declined, and we're about to walk around him to continue to the storefront. He lifted up part of the seat under the two pizzas he had carrying and grabbed a small handgun, pointed it at me, and told us to continue into the alleyway. We walked backward in order to keep our eyes on him. He got closer to me and pointed the gun to my head, it being about a foot from me at this point, and told us that if I was ever seen selling drugs on their turf again, whatever gang he was affiliated with, they'd kill me. I was very confused. Drugs? I never sold drugs. much less taken them or have ever seen them in my entire life. I told him as much and was told to stop lying, and that his boss told him someone who looks exactly like how I was dressed was selling drugs the day before in that area. I didn't want to push him any further, so I said okay, I wouldn't, and to please let me go. He then ran back to the scooter and drove off, at which point my friend and I hightailed it out of there, hailed a taxi, and within a few hours, we're at the next destination of our Mexico trip a few states away. Almost unalived by a crackhead with a machete when I was 19. Alrighty then. I've ran a few encounters on here before because my whole life I've been a magnet for bizarre people and situations occurring. So, I have way more encounters spicing up my life than I would like. But here we are. This story is both darkly humorous but also terrifying at the same time. So, I got kicked out of my house when I was 15 and I've been homeless periodically. This was one of those times. It was cold and I didn't want to be sleeping outdoors. So, I had to go through social services and they put me into what's called emergency housing. The people who approve these, the standards of some of these places need to be fired yesterday. They sent me to one of the worst neighborhoods ever in a house where I was the only female with four grown ass men for housemates. Oh no, no, no. And there was no one there supervising anything. Half the house was made up of a burnt out porch. There were both rats and roaches and monstrous proportions, and usually no heat or hot water. Me and one of the guys ended up sharing a room. I'll refer to him as Jay. One of our other housemates, I never actually saw this guy, and I don't know if he even lived there anymore or what. The other one was usually decent, but he drank so much every night that he forgot how keys worked, so he was usually found passed out on the floor outside his door. And then there was the guy from the Caribbean that I'm going to refer to as C, for both being the Caribbean as well as being the crackhead in this story. Dude was creepy as hell, and he had a lot of sex worker friends. And they knew that our front door lock generally didn't work, so it wasn't uncommon to just run into random huggers making grilled cheese in the middle of the night when I got up to pee. Well, that a sight to see. Me and Jay also liked to mess with C because one, we were stupid teenagers who didn't realize that crackheads could be dangerous. Two, we were both assholes who didn't have much to do. So we liked to screw around with C because we kept telling him to please stop lining his teeth up on the windowsill by the kitchen table when they fell out from said crack usage. Because it's, not the most appetizing thing to look at when you're eating. So, one night after the new tooth was added, we decided that we would just turn everything in the kitchen upside down and then wait for him to come into the kitchen and pretend like it was perfectly normal. We spent a good 4 hours doing this. It was almost impressive. It worked too well because he completely lost his shit after we kept telling him that the kitchen looked normal. What the fuck are you talking about? Also, it should be noted that it was December and we didn't have heat again. But this dude is jittering around the house in his tighty whities, sweating like a sprinkler. So, C went into his room and he's cursing and slamming things around in there. Jay goes to the bathroom and I hear C come tearing out. And then Jay comes running into the room, slams the door, looking absolutely terrified. He throws the chain lock on the door and tells me we gotta move the beds and dresser against the door and that C has a sword or some shit. It was a machete, and that thing comes blade first through the shitty door, exactly like in The Shining, but with a crackhead. So we're frantically trying to move our mattresses against the door and the dresser. And we have no other way out besides this window. We are going to have to go quietly as hell under the window and run through the woods in the dark to get to the nearest payphone to call the cops. C had several outstanding warrants, so he ended up getting locked up for quite a long time. Jay was and is a complete piece of shit unrelated to this story, and after this happened, social services thought that maybe this wasn't the best housing arrangement for me, and I moved to a different location. never heard anything else about the sea after that, as a lot of even worse things happened, and this event was put into the past, but for some reason it popped into my head again. Maybe not perfectly suited to this subject, but I hope it entertained anyone who read it. And yes, this is 100% a very real event that I went through, and I've lived a very odd life so far. Many people have asked me why I said that Jay was a piece of shit, so I'll explain. But I don't want to get into all the details of what happened to my brother. While I was at the place where the story took place, me and Jay had ended up becoming a couple. I had to go to another state for a week, and when I got back, things between me and Jay were off. Long story short, my brother and my best friend, who incidentally is now my boyfriend, we've been friends for over 20 years, and he was also my brother's best friend. I found out that Jay cheated on me during the whole duration that I was away. Now, my brother was a year younger than me, and out of everyone I've ever had in my life, he was my true best friend. We were extremely close. So, when my brother found out about Jay cheating on me, he didn't take kindly to it. So, he beat the living shit out of him. About a year later, my brother was unalived. Sorry, it was not Jay. So, being that me and my brother were so close, obviously this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my life, and it devastated me and my family, especially my mom. A few months after my brother was unalived, I went to get food with my mom. Who's there? This piece of shit, Jay. He found out what happened to my brother. He starts mouthing off that my brother got what he deserved. I'm trying to get at this guy, but my mom is begging me to just come with her and leave. And I didn't want to upset her anymore, so we head towards the parking lot. This mofo not only follows us out, he also pulls a knife on us. What? And I just see red because now he's threatening my mom. I have this big ass messenger bag that's just crammed with stuff and heavy as hell. So I just swing it out and around as hard as I can, and I hit him on the side of the arm and head, so he dropped the knife. Kicked it away and pushed him as hard as I could and ran into the car. My mom had gotten into the car and started it and backed out, so she had been ready to get out of there. All this happened within a few seconds, so we just took off. No, we didn't call the cops because my family had had more than enough to do with the cops, and they already had failed my family. And that's why Jay's a piece of shit. Damn. When I was 8, my mother almost unalived me. I'm 27 years old now, and as a mother of two, I'm constantly trying to be the best mother I can be, constantly evaluating my parenting, inevitably comparing it with that of my parents. Sometimes unwelcome memories come bursting forth. I am terrified of turning into my mother. I remember that day with such clarity. I was 8. My mother had always been somewhat ABUSC, physically and verbally. But that day, she outdid herself in every way imaginable. I was at school. It was after hours for primary students, and I was waiting for my older brother to finish classes so our mother would pick us up. That was usually the arrangement, except for Tuesdays when my brother had after-school activities and would stay even later than usual, in which case my mother would pick me up on time. That day, I'd forgotten that it was Tuesday, and instead of heading to the school gates, I went to the library, which is where I spent my hour waiting for my brother every day reading. I remember deciding to leave a little early and walk around until the bell rang because the weather was so nice, and the moment I stepped out of the library, I saw a sight that made my blood run cold. My mother was standing some distance away from the doors, and she looked positively livid. I was always terrified of my mother's bad moods because she would hurt me, yell, dig her nails into my arms, and leave scars, call me stupid and pathetic. I was always terrified of making mistakes, and I often did, with my head always buried in a book. I daydreamed a lot and was generally absent-minded. Anyway, there she was, her face filled with rage. I instantly remembered what day it was and realized my mistake. I kept her waiting for about 30 minutes. She took one look at me, turned on her heel, and charged out of the school doors without looking back. I followed her. She got into the car. So did I. She slammed the door. I cowered in the seat, clutching my bag against my chest. She drove for a good 5 minutes before she parked in an empty parking lot, turned around, and started striking my head with the heel of her shoe. What? I remember the shock and terror, the shame I felt at being bad, at upsetting her. She kept slamming the pointed heel of the shoe into my skull. Oh my God. And I saw fireworks over and over and over. I remember thinking as she hit me that it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Then I felt something warm drip into my left eye. I saw the dark liquid staining the heel of her blue shoe. It took me a while to register that I was bleeding. I was whimpering silently until that moment. Alarm bells went off. My mother didn't seem to notice until I had my palm out covered in blood. I screamed over and over to get her attention. Blood, blood, blood. I couldn't stop screaming. She dropped her shoe and started crying. She sped to the closest hospital. On our way there, she apologized repeatedly, her voice filled with panic and remorse. Why? Because you're going to get caught. I just felt numb. I remember lying in the back of the car, dazed, watching the palm trees flit by the car windows. She carried me to the hospital and screamed for help. The nurses ran over and asked what happened. At that point, my hair was matted with blood, and the left side of my face and shoulder were dripping with it. My mother stammered that I had tripped on the stairs and fell. While the doctor snipped the hair around the wound, my mother kissed my face over and over and whispered, "Sorry." She begged me to tell my father that I tripped on the stairs and fell. And that was our story. Except for my brother, I confessed to him later that day, sitting on the couch watching cartoons. He asked me how I fell on the stairs, and I said I didn't. Then Mom got mad because I forgot it was Tuesday and kept her waiting after school. He sat there in shock, not saying anything, but he let me hang out in his room that day. I never told anyone else but this. I never told anyone else. But this memory becomes fresh in my mind every single time my mother says something hurtful, or when I yell at my son and see the fear in his eyes. I feel a familiar rage bubbling at the pit of my stomach, and that terrifies me. I always go to the closest room, shut the door, and take deep breaths. I would never hurt my kids. It hurts me to think that my mother didn't love me enough to not hurt me that day, or all the days before it and after it. I just had to tell someone, even after all these years, it still hurts to think about. If you guys are still here, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you and I appreciate you so, so, so very much. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't yet and you feel so inclined to, because it really helps me out and I really, really appreciate it. And until next time, stay safe out there.